Okay, hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in today. Both rooms are filling up. We're in YouTube today. We're in Periscope today. So I actually decided to move away from Zoom. I know in the past we have used Zoom, and I wasn't feeling like we're getting much benefit out of it. The Zoom room was cool and all, and we had the Q&A function, but we weren't really using a lot of the other features of Zoom, and there are some other easier priced alternatives out there, so I decided to pursue that, and it gives us a few more tricks and things we can do in the course of our video together. So I look forward to kind of exploring some of that today as we go along. I am Jack Andrews, Captain Jack, and this is our 11th webcast together. Today I was going to talk about how sharps win. In fact, that's actually the title I chose there. How sharps win. I figured that's a little bit clickbaity. I apologize for that if you felt that that was a little bit of a clickbait. We are going to talk about how sharps win, but we're actually talking about the entire spectrum of sharp betting and how it all kind of plays in together. I feel like the entire gamut of sharp betting is a little bit misrepresented when it comes to the available media. A recreational bettor who wants to know more about a lot of this might run into some trips along the way of misconceptions and mistruths that are propagated out there as to how sharp bettors actually win. So I wanted to talk about what it really is. And so we're going to talk about some, but not all of the different ways that sharps win. But let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So the word spectrum is very apropos in describing sharp betting because sharp betting actually exists on a spectrum. We'll go through the 5 different types of sharp bettors that I could come up with for this presentation and how they contrast as well as complement each other. It should come as a surprise that sharp sports betting exists on a spectrum because there are so many different ways to win at sharp betting, at sports betting rather. Some of you may be thinking, well, yeah, I can beat football, or I can beat hockey, or I can beat baseball first 5 innings, etc. And that's true. There are many different sports you can bet and win via sports betting. And to be disciplined in handicapping any one specific sport is often, yes, good enough to win. However, what I'm saying goes beyond that. Sports betting is an ecosystem, and with many different moving parts and different roles, and it's analogous to the financial equity markets. So, you can buy and sell stocks via your preferred brokerage, but that's just one facet of the ecosystem of the stock market. You could day trade positions. You could choose to trade options instead. You could trade on commodity futures. The list goes on, and that's just for stocks. Meanwhile, there are foreign currency exchanges, binary options, arbitrage situations. There's an endless array of things you can actually bet on when it comes to the financial markets. However, then there are even offshoots to that, right? So there are those who sell their quantitative analysis skills. There are those who trade on non-public information. If there's an inefficiency to be found, there is someone who will likely find it. So then on top of all that, we also have predatory practices, not unlike sports betting touts, right? There are those who are selling picks and schemes, and they're preying on people's desire to shortcut the work and get rich quick. So it makes sense that if the sports betting ecosystem includes a wide range of characters and roles, the subset of that ecosystem that contains sharp betting would also have that same wide range. And this brings me to a question that I'll pose now, but I'll answer later, and that is, most sports books fear all sharps, but should they? Are all forms of sharp betting harmful to a sports book's bottom line? And are they a toxic asset to every sports book operation in all facets of that operation? But we'll dive into that a little bit more later. So why am I seemingly pulling back the curtain on how sharp betting is done? Wouldn't this be more harmful than good? Well, not exactly. See, what I've done with my videos as well as the work that I've been trying to do on YouTube is to give you a very conceptual logic of how sports betting is done. I'm giving you the information and the mindset without spoon feeding any of it to you. That's going to continue here today. We're going to be talking a little bit more in detail. So in previous presentations, maybe my presentation was geared towards the absolute novice, the very beginner of sports betting. This one's geared towards more of the, you've got your feet wet, you've been betting for a while, and you're not sure how to take it to the next level or what that next level is. So this is sort of a middle of the road type of presentation for you. As far as what we are discussing and what we aren't discussing, there's a phrase I'm very keen in saying, and that is there's the science of sports betting and then there's the art of sports betting. We're going to be discussing the science of sports betting here today, just like we have in past videos. And what we won't be discussing here very much, and what I don't think it would be worth making a video on, to be honest, is the art of sports betting. Part of why I don't discuss the art of sports betting is, one, to protect the artist's work. However, it goes beyond that. I've created a table, actually, to point out the innate dichotomy that exists between the two. So the science of sports betting is largely known. The information is public. It's known by bettors and operators. However, the art of sports betting is largely unknown. Different people know different parts. Each has their own style. And while the science of sports betting clearly has a method and approach applicable to any sports book, the art of sports betting is very subjective, depending greatly on where you are, who you are, and frankly, who is on the other side of the counter. And while the science of sports betting has been created and is in its like a firm state of being, the art of sports betting is evolving every day. It is constantly being refined and improved. And while the science of how to win betting sports is assumed by bettors, operators, and pundits, and everyone involved in this industry, the art of winning at sports betting isn't seen too easily to people that look into this industry. In fact, in many cases, the sports book doesn't even see the art of sports betting until you've won plenty of money from them. And lastly, the science of sports betting is discussed almost never-endingly, but the art of sports betting is closely guarded and shared only in very tight circles. So with that, let's dive in and explore the spectrum on which sports bettors exist. First is the originators, and as the name implies, they originate their action. They're not copying anyone or betting for someone. They have their own opinion of, and they reach that opinion whether it be qualitatively or quantitatively. It is also the most assumed form of sharp betting. To the public, all sharps are originators. They have some mysterious formula or crystal ball that helps them pick winners, and that's all they do. They just pick winners nonstop every day. In reality, and I think many of you already realize this, is that some sharps are, yes, originators, and some originators win, but that doesn't mean that all sharps are originators and all sharps win, and all originators win, rather. In fact, it's probably the most difficult form of sharp betting is originating. And it sits at one end of this spectrum here. And that's because it's almost pure science and very little art. When you're coming up with a way to beat a line or beat a market, it's very tactical and regimented in how you approach it for whatever system or angle that you're using. There's very little art that's needed in the actual handicapping of beating a market. So originators are likely also solo guys. It doesn't require a lot of social interaction to be an originator. You can have your spreadsheet, your model, or your newspapers, and you can use that to, come up with your lines, and that's it. They often are handicappers, whether it be on sides or totals or derivatives, and they often have an early opinion of their work, and they then find optimal points to enter the market. If you're a sports bettor, then a lot of people who don't bet sports thinks this is exactly what you do. However, most likely, many of you are actually grinders. And this is actually the most common form of sharp betting. Now, grinders are taken many different forms, and they're called many different things depending on who's calling them those names. Screen scrapers, steam chasers, inefficiency experts, whatever you want to call it. But these are the people that find an inefficiency in a line, and they use that to their advantage and come up with ways to beat the market, whether it be they look at a sharper book and compare it to a more square book, or they look at other things that are in the market, indicators for them. But these are the people that are basically, they're not using their own model, they're just using market influences to determine whether there's an advantage to be had that they want to bet into. Now, for some reason, this is the most despised form of sharp betting by sports books. And I think a lot of that reason is because this kind of rubs their nose in it a little bit. You know, you're pointing out their flaws, you're finding mistakes, you're finding times when they're moving too slow or they've put up a bad line and you're taking advantage of it. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but for whatever reason, sports books do find a lot of things wrong with that. And this is often the type of sharp bettor that just gets under their skin. Now, a sharp bettor that practices this grinding method of finding an edge everywhere they can is often finding low edges. They're finding leftovers, stale lines, things like that. They probably can't expect they have more than a 5% edge at best in a lot of situations. So the grinder really needs to find a high volume. They have a low edge, they need to find a high volume in order to make a decent profit at this. And the grinder often is basically in the science realm, because they are just finding an inefficiency in the market. It doesn't take a lot of thought process to see that one line is good at one book and the line at the other book is stale, and bet it at the stale number. But it does need a little bit of art. And I think this is something that gets grinders in a lot of bad situations, is they are in situations where they're not getting the best of it, and they need to be a little bit more artful in how they approach it, so they don't get under the skin of the sports books. So as a kind of a tail off to that other slide, so while all of your non-sports betting friends think that you're an originator, what you probably actually are is a grinder. And there's nothing to be ashamed of with that, though. So the next topic we'll talk about here, the next type of sharp bettor, and this is an interesting picture leading into it, is the middler. So the middler is the arbitrage player, the person that is looking to get the best of it on both sides of the number and hopefully hit that middle at times to basically win twice their bets. So a middler plays the market and not the sport. And this is very important to realize, is that they are looking at market inefficiency as a market as a whole, not so much in terms of having an opinion. Now, that's not to say all middlers don't have an opinion. Some of the best middlers actually have very early opinions that they lock into, and then they wait for the market to swing the other way, and then they grab an advantage on the other side. You know, it's absolutely kind of a genius way of doing it. The knock on arbitrage players is, oh, you're just betting both sides at the best number you can find and locking in a profit. Well, it's not that easy. You know, the market's never off by that much at the same time. It's not like you have 4 books to choose from and 2 of them are on, you know, either side of the 3 in the NFL. It just doesn't happen like that. So a middler actually requires some keen senses. They need to know how books react to action, their action, other people's action, market action. They need to know how to value that information, and not only that information, but how to value things like lineup information, injury information, many different forms of information that might come up during the course of a day, so they can get ahead of the line moves. And they also need to understand bet availability and bet sizing. So you're not only betting the best available number, but you need to realize, if I can lay $5,000 at this book, is there other books out there when that line moves where I can, pursue a profitable middle situation? If the rest of the market is only going to be $500, well, then your whole middle calculus that gets thrown off by that. So middling does take a few shots from people here and there, but I think middling is actually a very profitable way to do things. And the thing about middling is it's low variance, but it's highly profitable, especially if you're able to kind of offlay your action on either side of a game or an event. And middling has, in that sense, has a very low margin that you're betting into, especially, considering more times than not, only one side will win. You have to realize that you're going to need to bet a lot of volume in order to come up with profitability. And especially since middling often takes the work of more than one person, it's very tough to be a middler by yourself and, be able to handle all of this all at the same time. So it's usually an operation of people, and they especially need to have super high volume because they need to be able to overcome their overhead costs in pursuing their middling. So middling is definitely an interesting way to the sharp bettors get an edge. And then there's another one here that's not talked about too often, and this is the movers. So I think a lot of novice sports bettors, or even recreational sports bettors that are aspiring to be more, aren't familiar with what a mover does. Well, a mover is someone who not only moves money in getting bets down for you, and they, of course, take a cut of that, but they also can be used to move lines. They can manipulate market. They have enough different resources that they can be used to move lines, and they're very familiar with how sports books act and react to their action, and they use that and even abuse that to their benefit. So movers are a very interesting type of bettor in our ecosystem. They're very useful to sharp bettors because if you know a mover, you're in good shape because that person can get bets down for you at a price, and that person can also manipulate markets for you for a price. And a mover is definitely more artist than scientist, and we've kind of moved to that end of the spectrum now, right? So we're moving away from the science of sports betting into the art of sports betting. And then again, I have to kind of hold back on some of the information here, but for the most part, they use their artistry of knowing the market and knowing how to manipulate that market and knowing how to best approach the market. And a mover is often actually has a very low variance in their total, I guess, your ledger sheet of their income over the course of a year, because they're very diversified. In other words, they might be moving for you, they might be moving for somebody else, they might be moving for themselves. They might work in conjunction with an originator to get the lines down, and they take some kind of equity stake or even maybe a free roll stake in all of that. And they're often very connected people. They're often very networked people. They're more social. They may even work with some grinders to identify, situations of market inefficiency. And of course, they'll work with middlers because middlers are always interested in possibly moving the line around to their benefit. So movers are a very interesting part of the entire ecosystem, and they're one that's rarely mentioned. In fact, the next one coming up is another one that is rarely mentioned, and that is something I at least call the wranglers. So the wranglers are basically those who are able to wrangle up bookies or accounts or sportsbook accounts for other people. And this is definitely a legitimate part of the ecosystem when it comes to sharp betting. They basically find you accounts to bet on, and they, in ways, have these accounts, and the bookies that operate these accounts or the operators that operate these accounts don't understand that there's now sharp bettors being bet on them, because maybe before there weren't sharp bettors being bet on them. Maybe there were square bettors. So you had an account that suddenly becomes sharp, and you don't understand why until it's too late. They're extremely valuable. Bookie wranglers are extremely valuable to the ecosystem of sharp betting. And they are the most art. In fact, there's very little science to it because they're basically just using their networking connections. And one of the things they do, without getting too much into the art of it, one of the things they do is they set up basically the best of both worlds for themselves. So they set up deals with the bookies saying, oh, I get a percentage of this person's losses. And they set up a deal with the sharp bettor saying, oh, I get a percentage of your wins. And so whether the person wins or loses, they get a cut of it. And so really what they're hoping for is actually variance in the betting that goes on in the account, whether it wins a lot or loses a lot. That's when they profit. And in that sense, the entire Wrangler part of this ecosystem is very anti-fragile. It is not something that is going to be hooked into tying closely to the performance as the sports bettor. So it's kind of an ingenious way to approach sharp betting. You, of course, obviously have to have a number of outs. You have to have a number of people and bookies and I use the word bookies. It could be used in legal jurisdictions. It could be used in offshore. But definitely the Wrangler is a form of sharp betting that not a lot of people know about or have heard about, but it definitely exists. So let's recap here this spectrum of bettors, and we'll get back to that question I asked earlier. So we have the originators. These are the people that can originate their own lines. They can handicap. They come up with their own opinions. They're able to beat sports simply by handicapping. And then you have the grinders. These are the people that find the inefficiencies, that find the stale lines, that pick apart sports books that put up either bad lines or are slow to move their lines, or they copy somebody else's action. And then you have the middlers. These are the people that come in and play both sides of the coin in order to find the rare spot when it lands in the middle, and they can have a profit. And by the way, that middle profit, that's a positive EV play. These people aren't betting either side of it at minus 110 and hope it lands on some dead number in the NFL, in hopes that they'll win both their bets. It's not quite as haphazard as that. These are people that definitely know the market, know how much a half point is worth, and know how to play both sides of that market. And then you have the movers, the people that are able to get the bets down for the sharp bettors. They're able to manipulate the market when they need to. They're a very good resource for sharp bettors, but they're more on the artist side of it than the science side of it. And then you have those wranglers. Those are the people that are getting the accounts for sharp bettors, and they're playing both sides of the counter sometimes, but they do it well, and they're a valuable resource to sharp bettors. But what does this all mean to sports books? Like I said, most sports books fear all sharps, but should they? Well, let's quickly go back and look at this spectrum one more time and look at what these roles play in the ecosystem of sports betting. So the originators are originating information. They are giving information to the sports book on how their market can be beaten, how bad their line is, how what the sharp side of the line is. That's been proven and talked about many times in the past, that the originators basically are telling the bookmakers what the line should be. But then you have the grinders, and the grinders are giving the bookmakers awareness. They're pointing out the bad lines and the stale lines, and bookmakers can learn a lot from how grinders operate in their book and watch how they flow around their book to find where the inefficiencies usually are. But bookmakers tend to, like I said, they tend to feel like they got their nose rubbed in it rather than it just politely pointed out to them. So, that relationship doesn't always work out too well. But then the middlers come in, and the middlers are good at leveling markets. So, if a sports book says, oh, I'm too heavy on this side, and it's not the side I want to be heavy on, and they adjust their price slightly, well, the middler comes in and says, well, okay, that's good enough for me to take a taste of it. And they level out the market and help the sports book kind of guarantee a lower variance in their operation. And so, middlers can often be a sports book's best friend if they use them correctly. And the movers provide liquidity to the markets. All sports books need liquidity. All sports markets need liquidity. And that's what a lot of sports books suffer from, is lack of liquidity. And movers are there to kind of throw the money around, and they do a very good job of it. And so they can provide some liquidity. And then the last point is the wranglers, well, they can provide some promotion. They get more accounts going in your sportsbook. They get more money flowing around, customer database numbers going up. And that's often useful for the valuation of a sportsbook. So I recognize that not every sportsbook wants all of these people in their sportsbook all of the time. And I recognize that sportsbooks have a right to limit people and discourage betting from those that they feel they don't have their best interest in, and they feel like they're a toxic asset to their operation. But when you look at this and you see the entire spectrum of sharp betting includes all these different faceted ways to bet sports, that also means there's all these different key pieces of information and value that these bettors bring to the sportsbook. So if you don't like one of them, that's fine. You can identify that type of bettor and you can limit and discourage that type, while then encouraging or allowing another form of sharp betting. And it doesn't have to be just a broad brush stroked across the screen to limit all bettors who you think may be sharp. Now, again, I know I'm really preaching to the choir here, but I know there are industry people that watch these videos and these webcasts. And, this is a point that I've tried to get across for a long time. But it's a key point is that not all sharp bettors are the same. And there are different ways that we all win. And so, that needs to be taken into consideration. And then you can kind of come up with, your best strategy in approaching the market. And I think you're going to raise your monthly numbers by allowing different types of sharps into your book that aren't as threatening to you as you think they are. Okay, so that about does it for the presentation. We're going to move into the Q&A section. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's always kind of weird. I prepare these presentations and I don't really go over them too much in the meantime, and then I get up here in front of the camera and it's like, what was I going to say about this? Where am I going with this? So thank you for kind of lasting through that. My name is Jack Andrews. We're doing our live webcast for the week. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can use the YouTube chat to ask a question. And if you are on the Periscope live stream, you can use the chat there. I would ask, though, if you're on YouTube, to give it a like. If you're on Periscope, click that little heart there. Just let me know that you're out there and that you appreciate the content. On YouTube, you can subscribe, and I appreciate that. And you'll be notified of all future content that I have coming up. And on Periscope, you can follow me. But of course, if you're on Twitter, probably this popped up on Twitter already, and that's how you were kind of alerted to this. But I definitely appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the comments here. Let's see what we got. Okay, so Sam's Picks asks, if you had to choose one coding language to know, what would it be? How would you tell someone to begin learning how to code? Any resources or books? So coding languages. Well, if you had to pick just one, I would have to say it's probably Python at this point, but that doesn't mean that this answer is still true 5 years from now if somebody were to stumble across this video. That's just how it is. Right now, Python is the hot language. You can do web scraping with it. You can do pretty deep math with it. It's very versatile. It's a scripting language. It's easy to learn. It's very forgiving in how it approaches everything. A close second would be R, and R is really good if you're more quantitative minded, if you're not doing as much web scraping. But Python is definitely stronger when it comes to the web scraping. So I would go with Python at this point. But the thing to keep in mind with any coding language is it's a tool, and a tool is only as good as how you use it. So, I gave the example before. For years, I used Excel, and I was writing in VBA. And anyone who's ever coded in VBA knows that that's just kind of a, it's a crazy little language. It doesn't really do a whole lot. But I was able to use it because it was a tool, and it was useful for what I was using it for. So, any language is good. You did ask for a book. In one of my other webcasts, I gave a couple books. I think it was Web Scraping with Python, or Web Scraping with Beautiful Soup, I think was one of them, and Web Scraping with R. I'll dig up those links and I'll put them in the description to this video. and you can check them out. By the way, you like this little on the bottom of the screen here, we're going to have the actual comments and questions from either the chat on Periscope or YouTube. Just a little something new that trying out here with this different software. Over on Periscope, Fried Limes, that was the name I was going to use. Fried Limes asked, are we going to be able to watch this again? Yes, you can watch this broadcast again on either of those. It'll be up on my YouTube channel after this is finished, as well as I believe it stays around on Periscope, not as quickly, not as easily to link to, but you know, YouTube's probably the best place to go ahead and rewatch this again later if you'd like. Mike asks, I'm brand spanking new, boss. Where I start? Well, that's up to you. I have a lot of other videos on different ways that novice bettors can get started. You can watch the Making a Modeler series and kind of walk you through some of the conceptual items when it comes to making your first model and web scraping and learning about correlation. The fourth video in that series is probably another week or two out. I do have some new videos coming out this coming week. They're going to be a little bit more on ways to kind of quickly handle the math of sports betting. Excuse me. Handle the math of sports betting. And so they'll be out this week. I decided on what I'm going to do is kind of batch them together and kind of put them all up at once. So actually, one of them's already done. The second one is just about ready to be done. And the third one I hope to finish this weekend. Put them up all there on probably on Monday. Excuse me, I'm going to have to get a drink here. Jerry asks, could you make it as a sharp bettor using only a CSS in your own name, or do you require wranglers? I'm coming to the stage where I'm running out of accounts and I'm starting to look at alternatives. I don't know what a CSS is, but basically, can you make it as doing everything in your own name, or do you have to use wranglers? Well, yeah. You always reach a point where the science of sports betting becomes much tougher, and you need to explore the art of sports betting. So using other people to get accounts for you and things like that is definitely one way to approach it. I would like to think that in many jurisdictions, or even in the whole world jurisdiction that is the offshore industry, there are still enough places that you can get down. But I know it's tough, and it's definitely a struggle. So this is sort of, you know, something else you can explore to hopefully use in the future. Just notice the quality of the video is very poor. I don't know if it's been this poor for a while. I apologize if it is. But maybe when I upload this to YouTube, I'll use another recording of it, which will be a higher quality. Okay. Jared asks, what approach would you recommend for someone getting more serious into sports betting? The top-down, assuming the line is right and work backwards approach, or the bottom-up, data-driven approach? This is a good question, Jared. And it's good that you know those two terms already. So if you can actually use both, and I think that's what I would recommend to you, is to not pigeonhole yourself into one or the other. But if you have a leaning towards one, then go with that. So in other words, in that top-down approach, if you assume that you're looking for ways in which the market is just inefficient, and you're kind of finding those inefficiencies and pointing them out, you know, that can be very successful for you. And of course, it's scalable into just about every sport. If you go from a data-driven approach, you're often spending a lot more of your time up front in building models, or building an angle, or finding some sort of way you want to exploit the market. And it's a little bit tougher for you to kind of use that as your approach, because there's a lot of time invested in the front end of it. So you know, my approach is, my advice is probably a little bit in the middle. I would say explore them both and figure out which way that you want to lean in it, and go that way. So I don't know, that's probably not the best answer for you, but hopefully that's an answer that kind of gives you some direction. Oh, and actually there was a little bit of a follow-up here from Jared saying, I shouldn't have said what do you recommend, but what's more approachable to you? Well, there you go. I mean, I didn't really recommend either one of them. So I would definitely look to yourself and see what's more approachable. I kind of feel like in terms of getting going, the looking at the market as being somewhat efficient and finding the inefficiencies is probably an easier approach, to be honest with you, than putting in the time and effort it takes to come up with a more data-driven approach. Bob Sharkey asks, Jack, name the best Vegas book. I can't really do that. Name the best offshore book. Can't really do that either. These are all subjective things. These are the best for you, not the best for me. You know, I know what's best for me, but it might not be what's best for you. These things are very subjective. Who's the best Twitter follow? Well, that's me. Who's the best public handicapper? None of them. You know, look, we've gone over before. 1 to 2% of bettors win, so that means 1 to 2% of touts win. Probably even less than that. And so you can go ahead and name yourself 100 touts, and maybe you'll get one in there that's even a winning tout. So I really don't have a lot of faith in public handicapping. If you really are a good public handicapper, you wouldn't really want to put it out publicly because that only erodes your edge. And also, name the best advice you've ever received in sports betting. The best advice I've ever received in sports betting is to learn how to lose. Everybody knows how to win. Not everybody knows how to lose. When you learn how to lose, you become a better winner. And I think I might leave that one as cryptic right there. But basically, you need to learn how to lose before you can learn how to win. Las Vegas RS says, what's the worst Vegas book? Well, there's some out there that are just, I don't know why. I don't know why they even try. Treasure Island, you know, good luck betting more than $300 on anything in that place, whether it be an NFL side or anything. I don't know why they even exist if they don't want more than a $300 wager. And that's from a nobody. That's not from like a, you know, a Square or a Sharp. That's just, you know, $300. You know, I kind of doubt the way that some of that industry is going out there in Vegas. Some of them seem to be sort of just kind of inching along until they can sell themselves off to somebody else, or they're letting themselves be gobbled up by other corporations. I think Vegas, especially now after this whole pandemic, I think the sports betting scene out there is only going to get a little bit worse. The future is in other states, unfortunately. Beat the House, Sports and Politics. Oh, now that sounds like a fun follow. Best states for mobile bets. Right now, New Jersey is probably still the best in terms of mobile options. You know, it's a fully formed ecosystem here in terms of you can do all your banking remotely. You know, you can register remotely, all that. Colorado is going to be good. Colorado, they're just starting to get off the ground. I'd say it's going to be July and later is when we're going to see more things come in from Colorado. And so that's promising. And other than that, don't know that there's any other states that are really good at this point for the mobile app. But there's promise. There's promise. They can do better, and hopefully they will do better. Of course, they can also do worse. So who knows? Dave says, are you hiring? Will work for knowledge. I'm not hiring in terms of sports betting. If you know how to edit YouTube videos well, we might be able to work something out. Or if you're a graphic artist that might want to help me with thumbnails for YouTube videos and slides like this, maybe we'll work something out. I don't know. But thanks, Dave. I'll keep you in mind. Let me just scroll back, make sure I haven't missed any questions along the way here as I'm kind of going through. Oh, here's one I did miss. Yura says, love the videos, thank you. Any advice for a manual arbitrage player? Tips, probably, I think they meant, to automate the process. Yeah, being a manual arbitrage player, that's really tough. Arbitrage, you're identifying two different sides of the market, or you're knowing which way the market is going to be moving. So that's tough. I would say my tip would be to try to automate it. And, you can look into web scraping the information as it comes, and then applying some logic to it on the back end, and then spitting out the result. Now, the result could then go to some kind of bot that makes the bet for you, or the result could go to sending you a text message on your phone and saying, here's a bet and here's a bet, jump on it. I've done that in the past, and it's not that hard to do in terms of the logic, and you can Google around on how to create a simple Python script that sends you a text message. So it's something you can try out there. By the way, can somebody comment as to if the quality has been pretty poor this entire time? Every time I look over on my feeds here, it looks like I'm 3 feet underwater or something like that. I hope the sound quality is at least good. Thanks. Okay, let's see any other questions here that I've missed so far. Oh, the Iceman asked, where would you put yourself on the spectrum? That's good. That's a good question. I am probably more towards grinder and originator than any of those other ones. But I do have friends that are wranglers. I have friends that are movers. I have friends that are middlers. So it's good to have your own little network of people. Now, if you could then form a team of people and each one has their own job, that's a pretty tough syndicate to beat. So that's something to kind of think in mind as you kind of take this webcast and where to go from here. But no, I do definitely have probably more grinder and originator than anything else. I don't. Oh, Brock. Hey, Brock. Brock asks, can grinders beat sharp books? Can grinders beat sharp books? Yes, because even the sharpest books aren't sharp on everything. I don't want to disclose anything, but the sharpest book out there, we all know who the sharpest book in the world is. They're not sharp on everything. In fact, they're pretty weak on some things, and they know what they're weak on, actually. I think they're just looking for the right person to come in and educate them so they can use that information. But even the sharpest books aren't sharp on everything. And likewise, even the sharpest bettors aren't sharp on everything. It's just the way it is. All right, so yeah, I do apologize for the video quality of this. It's unfortunate. I'm going to see what I can do about that. But at least the sound has been good, and I'm pretty sure that I can upload a video version that will be sharper quality for the replay. All right, let's see what else we got here. So Dave Backstrom did comment, you forgot one category of sharps, the bonus whores. Yeah, that's true. I thought about putting that in, but I wasn't sure exactly where that would fit into it. And that's sort of something that's not necessarily a sharp sports bettor thing. That's just a sharp AP type of thing. And yeah, I plan to actually do some videos talking about bonus whoring, so to speak. Bonus hustlers is what I'll call it. People that are looking to take advantage of promotions and use that as a way to kind of build a bankroll. So maybe that'll be a future series. Jeffrey Lawson, I don't have a Leinenkugel with me today, but I do have a Leinenkugel glass. Not that you're going to be able to see that on the video because it's obviously the video quality is pretty poor today. But I have my Leinenkugel glass, but it's filled with iced tea. I'm sure there's a few more questions here, just scrolling down to them. Sam's asks, what's your most memorable bad beat? The one I've used before, and I kind of think it still has to stand is way back when I bet a prop on Bodog, back when it was still Bodog, and it was on Jim Thome, and the prop was supposed to be whether he will have over under 2 hits in a game, and they misworded the prop and they wrote over under 2 home runs in the game. And I said, oh, there's no way Jim Thome hits 3 home runs in the game. Well, if he comes up in the first inning and he hits a home run, and he comes up in the third inning or so and hits a home run, I go, you got to be kidding me, right? But at least I'm only pushing this bet, because I looked and Jim Thome had only once other time in his career hit 3 home runs in a game. Well, he came up in around the 8th inning and he hit his 3rd home run of the game. So even though I found a horrible line, I probably had about a 96% edge. In fact, that's what I calculated. I had a 96% edge on this wager. I found a way to lose it because Jim Thome hit 3 home runs in the game. And true story, he never hit 3 home runs again in a game the rest of his career. So that is my bad bet story, bad beat story. A little bit more here from Jared. He was talking about that he's working through Andrew Mack's Statistical Sports Models in Excel. A great book, great 2 books that Andrew Mack wrote. These are really good reading. Even if it doesn't exactly spoon feed you on everything, it gives you a lot of the good knowledge of how models can be done in Excel. So I highly recommend Andrew's books. And I'm hoping he said he's going to do some YouTube videos to kind of explain some concepts from the books. Andrew, if you do that, man, they'd be great. But anyway, he goes on to say, Jared does, that if I know I can't bet my model strictly, but can still generate okay numbers close to the market, how can I integrate that with the logic of betting ideas? Well, you know, here's the thing. Like, if you can generate numbers that are close to the market, so you understand how the market makes its numbers, then you can also keep shopping around and find when the market is, when the market, the other sports books in the market are off the number. And that's how you could possibly use that information. Or you could then drill down in that information and find derivative bet opportunities. So if you know how the line is made, and you know basically how a derivative line is made, well, then you could use that to possibly, you know, go a step further and you know, come up with ways to beat a derivative market, because derivative market pricing is usually not as sharp as regular sides and totals. JJ asked, do you use bots to bet? I personally do not use any bots to bet. I have used bots for information and information gathering, but using them to bet would technically be a violation of terms and conditions of many of the sports books that I play at. So even if I did use bots to bet, I wouldn't admit it on a YouTube chat. Thomas Stevens asks, do most sharps fall into only one of these categories, or are they perhaps a mix of several? Yes, absolutely. You can be on several planes of that spectrum. You can be a little bit, you know, grinder to originator, and you know, so on. You can find all different ways that the market works best for you. It would be tough to carry too many hats or wear too many hats, because it's really tough to approach sports betting from more than one discipline. You know, you can't look at sports betting and say, oh, well, I can originate and then I can grind and find line inefficiencies, and then I can move all the money around, and then I can also find the other side and play it back, and then also kind of come up with all these different accounts for people and swap off accounts. You know, that's a lot of work right there. So if you focus on just one of those, you often find a little bit more of a niche that you can work into and go from there. So it's far easier, I think, to take a different approach than trying to wear all the hats at the same time. Okay, a few more questions here. We got about 10 minutes left in our time together. And so if you have any more questions, go ahead and toss them into Periscope or into YouTube. And if you don't mind, go ahead and toss me a like on YouTube if you haven't already. toss me a heart on Periscope, I would appreciate it. And that helps the algorithms on both of those services kind of promote my content for future times. So I appreciate that. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Speaking of bad beats, did you see what happened on BetOnline in the poker room? Yes, the guy gets disconnected. He has a straight flush. I absolutely saw that. I really liked it because Joe Ingram, who is kind of a voice for poker players and kind of an industry pundit in the poker player community, he immediately voiced his opinion on it, put it out there. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers. He spread the word, and BetOnline caved in, and that's impressive. That's one of the risks of the offshore industry, is that sometimes you don't know if something doesn't go your way and it wasn't your fault, but it wasn't their fault. Sometimes they just tell you to pound sand. Well, in this case, BetOnline did the right thing. Hats off to them, Dave Mason, their crew, for doing that. And because basically, you're right, if you've got a straight flush on the turn, you're not folding it. His connection timed out for whatever reason, and his hand was folded, and the guy had quad kings, so he would have beat the quad kings, and the quad kings player would have won the bad beat jackpot. As Joe Ingram pointed out, like 35% of that bad beat jackpot goes into seeding the next jackpot. So really, the player that won the hand got like 50,000. The player that lost the hand got like I think 150,000, and then the rest went right back into seeding the pot for the next time. So BetOnline's not really their money they're giving away. They're just giving away an accrued jackpot that, if they roll over, even makes more sense, because now there's more money in that pot and more money going in with the rake of each hand of poker. So hopefully that was a no-brainer for them to step up and do that, but I was glad to see it. DM asks, do you recommend opening accounts under a wife's name or other close family or friends? Well, this is sort of like the art of sports betting. I don't want to say too much about this. I will say, however, if you're a sharp bettor and then suddenly your wife is all of a sudden a sharp bettor, that seems a little fishy, right? Look at what happened with the DraftKings thing with the guy and lady from The Bachelor, Jade and Tanner. Don't know why I know those names. She claimed to, oh, that was my lineup that just won the $1 Million Maker. And Tanner's like, yeah, she's a big, I think Tanner's the guy. Yeah, she's a big DFS player. But then, you scroll back in tweets from years back and you see that she says, I hate DFS. I hate that Tanner spends all his time playing DFS. So, I think it's a little transparent if you sign your wife up. Now, if you sign, a friend up and you tell your friend what to play and he puts the bets on his phone, that doesn't seem to be too bad. But I don't want to get too far into finding ways to violate terms and conditions. That's just not profitable for any of us to put out there into the public. Okay. I'm just going to say Check99. He's our viewer from Portugal. Hi, Check99. Good to see you again. Another question, isn't that all of these are important in the ecosystem? Example, sharper bookies like Pinnacle need all of them, and they prefer sharps, but which ones, in your opinion, do they prefer? Okay, so what he's saying is, aren't all of these important in the ecosystem? Yes, they are. Don't some books prefer all of them? Well, I don't know if books prefer all of them, but they can utilize all of them if they want. I wouldn't say they prefer any of them in terms of like, oh, we need, this, we need, but they can use all of them. And when they choose not to use all of them, that's when they shortchange themselves and they leave a lot of money on the table, because some of this isn't necessarily sharp action, it's just action. And they kind of ignore that. Jack, are you using Pinnacle for betting? No, I'm not, because I'm in the United States and they do not take any U.S. citizens into their sportsbook, and they haven't since like 2009 or so. They got out of the U.S. very early in when the United States started to crack down on things. Might have even been before 2009. I don't know the exact date. And there's hope that maybe they can come back into the United States. I don't think they want to come back in as a consumer presence. They want to come back in more as a B2B presence where they set the lines and other books use their lines. Because Pinnacle doesn't really have any need to be back in the United States. They're doing just fine in other jurisdictions. Went a little sidetrack there, but the question was from Talpa, are you using Pinnacle for betting, and at which ROI do you beat them? In which markets? Cheers from Italy. Cheers. So going back to when I was playing in Pinnacle, no, I didn't beat them. In fact, I remember having a conversation with Henry, who used to be the operations manager at Pinnacle back in the early 2000s. And he said he had 4 players on their database who had won long term. 4 out of the thousands of players that had played there. It's very easy to say that nobody really beats Pinnacle long term. They may beat Pinnacle with something, but not everything. So. Yeah, Pinnacle's that's a whole different story there. And of course, what Pinnacle is today is not what they were 10, 15 years ago. There was an ownership change along the way. And so they're not quite the same company they once were. Okay, I think we're coming up to our final question here. And we are coming up right on our hour. So I'm going to make this the final question. For Underground Bookie, is there an edge I can get on where he gets his numbers? Never match the books I look up. Well, it's tough to say that, Mike, because all bookies are different. All underground bookies some are pay-per-head, where they're actually, leasing an account for you at an offshore book that maintains the lines, and those lines are kept differently. There's different companies out there that handle accounts for different people. That's a lot to kind of get into at the end of this broadcast, but basically there's no one central source for every underground bookie that's out there. So that's part of the art of sports betting. You need to know where your lines are coming from that you want to bet into, and then possibly you can use an odds screen to kind of parse what the sharp lines are for the market compared to the lines that you're looking to bet into. But good question nonetheless, Mike. I appreciate it. So I thank everyone for joining me today. Like I said, I will try to come and look at the video quality here. I apologize for that. I didn't expect it to be this bad. It wasn't that bad in my test broadcasts, but at least the sound was good and hopefully the information was solid. So I thank you for attending, and please join me again next week. I will see you then.